Plywood provides an economical alternative to solid wood for making shelves, cabinet sides, and other large project parts. But then you're faced with the problem of what to do with the ugly plywood edge. The solution is an edge band of solid wood. And everything seems well until it's time to finish it. That's when you discover that solid wood and plywood often absorb stain at different rates. The reason you're going to get color differences with stain is because of the thinness of the plywood. Because it's sitting on top of a layer of glue that doesn't absorb stain, it's going to change a different color than the solid wood where the stain can penetrate more deeply. As you can see here, a knothole underneath the surface veneer shows just how thin that veneer is. There are two ways you can equalize the absorption of the stain. The first is to use a wood conditioner, which is actually a very thin form of film finish, polyurethane or an alkyd resin varnish. Or you can use a gel stain. The gel consistency of the stain limits the amount of penetration that it can create on the surface. The first precaution you need to take when attaching the edge banding to the plywood is to avoid smearing glue on the surface. Dried glue, especially glue that's been forced down into the pores, is going to act as a barrier to your stain no matter what you use, as you can see here. The more blotch-prone the wood that you're working with, the more you need to take precautions in the form of using a conditioner or a gel stain. For example, wood that will probably give you more trouble is Baltic birch or a birch veneer plywood, especially if you're using a maple edging on it. Here we've conditioned the wood and the edging on this side and left this side uncoated. So let's see how the two sides fare when I put a liquid stain on them. As you can see, I've reduced the blotching on the plywood and pretty much eliminated it on the maple. However, I still have blotching on the unconditioned side, both on the maple and on the plywood. That still leaves me with a problem of what to do with the maple portion, which is a little bit darker than the plywood portion. One way to solve this problem is to equalize it using the stain, but in this case, I'm going to be a little bit more careful about how I wipe it off, or at least a little more selective. Here you can see I have covered this again with a second coat of stain, which technically I would allow the first coat to dry before I try a second. But what I'm going to do is very gently wipe this off. I'm just barely touching the surface with the rag. What I want to do is leave enough stain on the surface here that when it dries, the binder in the stain will hold it in place, and I'll have a color roughly comparable to what I have on the plywood. It's important to remember when you're using this technique to allow the stain to dry completely. The binder is like a varnish. It's going to have to dry at least overnight before it sets up. As you can see, I've got a little better color here. I could, if I wished, go back and selectively stain areas such as the light portion here and feather that in with my cloth. See, I'm starting to get a little more equal coloration here between the two. Keep in mind I'm using an oil-based stain, so I've got a little bit of time to work on this. It's not like a water-based stain where it's going to dry immediately. And there you can see I'm getting closer to it. Another application tomorrow, and I'll probably be able to bring this color roughly equal to this color.